Hello, citizens of the global planet. This is Austin Shippey, and you are listening to my new podcast, the second episode of Austin Shippey's Apocalypse podcast. My whole business and public representation is all about spirituality in the modern world, as well as psychic abilities, and being an advocate for exploring those things and not cutting them out of your life. So, last podcast episode I talked a bit about allegories, Christian allegories, religious allegories, basically stories that seek to teach a lesson. And my new book, 3 short stories based on dreams, like dreams often are, and like nightmares often are, is a collection of allegories. So the dreams are meant to take you into a situation that you otherwise would not get to experience and try to teach you the lessons that can be gained from that experience. All 3 of the stories start out as dreams, and then they turn into nightmares. And this story, Slow Pulse, is the 3rd and newest story that I wrote for this book. And it follows the story of a man in our modern world and his journey through about a week of his life. And before I get into the story, I hope you're all cozy, and I'm imagining everyone sitting around their radio in the olden days and listening to a story and being taken into another world by the power of a person's voice. And I hope that's where this podcast episode transports you. So relax, get your imagination muscles revved up, and get ready to be taken into a dream. Some reminders before I start. I have a website where you can look and see visuals and pictures and see all of the stuff that I put out for everyone to see. And on my website in the top right-hand corner, or in the little pull-down bar, is a link to all of my social media, so you can follow me on social media. And I also have a Patreon for those who want to support my work, if you're enjoying what I'm putting out. And a reminder to subscribe to my YouTube and subscribe to Spotify and iTunes podcasts and wherever you can, so you get all the updates. And without further ado, let's get into Slow Pulse. All of the rest stops he had passed were out of commission. Perhaps they had been for decades. One of them was littered with trash and graffiti from local teenagers, the other 3 barren and trapped in time. No one reclined on the benches or pressed the buttons of the empty vending machines. The bone-dry grass hopped to quiet life with grasshoppers. Every rest stop seemed to follow the same design template. Slanted, jutting roofs, tall top beams, and every outside wall paneled with dry, burnt umber planks. The outdated construction assured him that he was surely creeping closer to his hometown. As he drove down the dusty roads, beneath the gray and overcast sky, he recalled his first moving to the place where he grew up. When his mother and father first married, the town consisted of 2 main streets and 3 or so neighborhoods, but was quickly expanding. Foundations for hotels were carved deep into the red clay, and at sunset tractors could be seen dotting the horizon. By the time he was born in 1987, the town's expansion had come to an abrupt halt, and the houses constructed in the 70s slowly lost value as their occupants died or moved away. All further development was then devoted to trailer parks and expansive plots of manufactured homes. When he was a teenager, the recession hit. Half of the town fled, leaving its leftover residents to struggle alone. Like the lives of those who chose to stay, the pits dug for foundations were left empty. By the end of high school, every option was shit. At 18, he left his parents to enlist in the military and aim for a shot at a successful life which he knew would be unattainable if he did the simple thing by staying. He recalled memories of his parents loading the truck and stacking all of their belongings against the thin, wood-paneled walls of a manufactured home. At 15, he resented his parents bitterly for moving him across town, as he would have to bike half an hour just to see his friends. Over the summer, they regularly met halfway, hanging out in front of grocery stores and exploring abandoned and dangerous buildings. But when school started, his friends found new friends closer to them, and, he knew, not as poor as he was. He recalled asking his father for money to go roller skating with his friends at 13, and the violent fight it caused. His brother bleeding, bruised, his mother crying on the porch. He now hadn't seen his brother in 16 years. He calculated the days, dates, birthdays in his head, using the dashboard as a slate. The towns passed, many abandoned, the sky growing grayer. Speckles of rain collected on the windshield, yet the sky would not relinquish enough water to quench the dry loam all around him, or moisturize the sand-blasted, hollow, pithy cacti standing like dark statues in Medusa's garden. Suddenly, a hitchhiker. Every visit he had made to his remote Arizona hometown, one rule was reinforced. If you see a hitchhiker in the desert, you pick them up. You help them because no one else is going to, and if you were in their situation, you would be praying for a kind person to drive by. In places like this, you help people. "Thank you, man. I appreciate it," the young, sweaty native hitchhiker said as he slung his camouflage backpack into the back seat. "No problem. I was always taught that out here you try to help. You heading to Ruby?" Peter asked. "For better or for worse, yep. My grandpa owns a gas station and could use some help running it until he moves to Phoenix next year." "Yeesh, a full year?" The hitchhiker laughed, wiping puddles of sweat from his sideburns. I know, but it will be nice to see old family." They drove in silence for a moment. "You got any family in Ruby?" the hitchhiker asked. "No, not anymore. That's why I'm driving down here. My dad just died. I'm coming to clean his apartment and pay my respects." "Oh, I'm sorry." "Don't be," Peter asserted. "We had a bad relationship. We haven't spoken since I was 18. He was abusive. Alcoholic." Alcoholism is everywhere down here. My dad lived with a beer can in his hand. I'm lucky, though, that my mom left him when I was young. My sister and I had a better childhood that way." "You're lucky, but I don't envy the year you have ahead of you now," Peter said with a laugh. "Does the shop at least have air conditioning?" "If it don't, I'm buying one first thing." He grinned. They drove for a while, passing more rest stops and several long-abandoned skeletal ranches. Peter knew from the signs that they would be in Ruby within the hour. The sun was just beginning to set, casting a crimson glow across the desert landscape and stretching black shadows across the plains, like long fingers scratching for something far out of reach. Peter dropped off the hitchhiker and watched him approach a small yet well-kept house nestled at the back of a large stretch of land. The yard was filled in with dark red volcanic pebbles, and the front of the house was adorned with potted ferns and swaying flower pots hanging from the roof. He was surprised to see people doing so well in Ruby, and guessed that they were running on generations of accumulated money, which was most likely near depletion. He drove alone to his father's apartment, winding his way through the darkened town with few working streetlights to see by, clumsily utilizing a water-stained and sun-bleached map he obtained from one of the rest stops. He had no cell phone service. As he drove through the town, he was happy to see greenery after his long desert drive. It was mostly towering and uncared for, poky evergreens with cinnamon-colored bark and bunchy shrubs covered in sticky flowers. He remembered picking those flowers as a child, the sap from them coating his fingers and dirt sticking to his hands for days afterward. He reminisced about climbing those tall and powerful tree branches, and of one time falling out of one and spraining his ankle. He continued to play without caution, so it took twice as long to heal. It seemed as if he had that cast on for years. The aging apartment building, signposted in the front with Desert Rose Apartments, sat in darkness. Peter grabbed the envelope containing the keys from the glove box and wheeled his suitcase up the concrete steps littered with cigarette butts. He brought a stack of flattened cardboard boxes up to the apartment, along with a Walmart bag containing garbage bags, packing tape, and Sharpies. He set everything in the center of the front room, then walked around the house, slowly opening the windows to let in the cool night breeze and relieve him of the stench of a decade's worth of stale cigarette smoke. He packed up a few framed photos and keepsakes and tossed most of the rest in garbage bags, which he flung into the rusted dumpster at the end of the apartment complex. He found a half-empty pack of cigarettes and a bottle of whiskey in the cupboard and decided to have some on the porch. He listened to the sound of crickets singing to the night all around him and remembered the time he stole a cigarette from his father and almost lit the couch on fire. He thought of the few good memories he had of his dad, intentionally, for this moment, ignoring the shouting, the punching, the degrading, and the fear which overwhelmed his childhood. He washed the dirty bed sheets and blankets from his father's bed, but decided to sleep on the worn leather couch. The bed would be too odd. Peter found himself sleeping restlessly. There was something off-putting about the nearly empty apartment. He could almost imagine the ghost of his father, cigarette in hand, watching TV on the couch Peter now tossed and turned on. Dreams were vague and staggered. They struggled at forming a simple vision, scene, or sentence of meaning. He felt movement, as if he was falling through darkness, trying to grab onto anything he could find. He ran around in the darkness of his mind, begging for words he could not form, awake or asleep. A memory screamed into deaf ears, vain fables punching at dead muscle. He awoke early the next morning while the sun was just glimmering above the horizon. He tossed 4 large garbage bags into the dumpster and drove through the town. He stopped at a donut shop which had been running comfortably since the 70s. Sitting on top of a buzzing soda freezer was a small cell phone booster. He was glad to have service, which he used to send a message to his old friend. Luckily, sandwiched between travels, she was only an hour's drive away, and she agreed to meet him later that night at a bar. The show is absolutely amazing. What are you working on now? Is the next season coming? We just finished the script for season 3, Marina said through a grin, shying away from Peter's praise. She was glad to see him. I'm sure it'll be fantastic. I'm so happy for you. The lines around Marina's face were pronounced. Although she was almost a year younger than Peter, she looked much older. Though there was a strange, moisturized, milky look to her skin, similar to the appearance of a fine, white pearl. Her blonde hair was thin, but teased up with hairspray. She moved slowly and deliberately like a monk in constant meditation. She wore 2 pieces of fine jewelry, a large statement ring on her middle finger and a pair of diamond earrings. In the back of a busy restaurant, one would most likely not notice her at all, as if she blended into the background. Yet upon noticing her, you would notice something strange and unique. She was charismatic in an effortless way. She was wealthy and successful, stemming back to a golden ticket scholarship and a talent at writing fiction. She had written for the #1 TV show for 2 years. The two drank glass after glass of cold beer and weaved their way through the details of the past several years. The bar slowly shrank from the world of the many to the world of the two. My father's funeral is tomorrow. Would you like to go? Oh, she hesitated. Peter, I don't know if I have time. Noticing his disappointment, she reevaluated her decision. Of course I can. I'll be there for you in any way that I can. I'm not even sure why I'm going. Maybe because I'm afraid that he was alone at the end. Somehow me showing up can make that easier to stomach. How has it been for you? Marina asked. I mean, the loss. I know you two haven't been in contact. It's been strange, I guess. I'm not sure I think it's real yet. It feels like I'm watching a scene from a movie about someone else. Like I'm just peeking in on someone's life from the outside. Or the inside? This is all a part of grieving, Marina interjected. It's completely understandable. It's okay to be confused and have mixed emotions. Maybe, Peter replied. But I think this is different. It isn't really my life. It's like a consequence of my life. It's like birds are not really a part of my life, but when one breaks its neck on my window, I go outside, scoop it up, and bury it. That's a bit grim. True, bad comparison, he agreed with a half-smile. I haven't been sad, really. I've just felt detached, and I've been having dreams about my childhood, just repeating events that happened in the past. Oh? Yeah, there was one last night, actually. Only one that I can remember. It was just this time we took a big vacation to the beach, my brother, Dad, Mom, and I. My dad wanted to fish, which my brother and I hated because he expected so much from us. We just wanted to play. So I dreamed of us fishing. Peter shook his head and shrugged his shoulders. I suppose it's sweet to dream of that, even if you don't have the fondest memories of it. That was when we could afford a boat and a vacation, Peter added with a laugh. The time I'm dreaming of is different, though. I almost died. I never heard about this, Marina laughed, surprised. Yeah, Peter chuckled. I was really stupid, but you couldn't blame me. I was probably 9 or 10. My parents were fighting about something in the RV. My brother was sleeping. I decided to escape the fight and try to prove my dad wrong by catching some fish myself. He had been complaining all day that we didn't wake up early enough, because fish supposedly swim closer to the surface at night. So I got in the boat on my own and rowed out. It seemed simple to me, watching my dad sail. He made it seem effortless. But, of course, the boat got away from me, and I got pulled out to sea. It was completely dark, no one around to help me. Marina steepled her hands in front of her mouth with widened eyes. Peter chuckled at her shock. To him it just seemed like another strange event in the muddy pool of childhood memory. I jumped out of the boat, tried to swim to the dock, and almost drowned. I ended up making it back to shore, though I don't remember the swim. I was freezing and coughing, and I walked back to the house expecting my dad to kill me. I walked as slow as I could. I had snuck out, lost the boat, and almost died. I was dead meat. I sobbed and shook and cried all the way home. When I got home, all was peaceful in the RV. They went to sleep? With you missing? No, they were fucking. Both laughed at the tragic irony. The next day I told my parents what happened, sobbing the whole time. My dad went outside and found the boat washed up on the beach. It needed to be cleaned and dried out, but it was otherwise unscathed. I got a lecture, and that was that. You see, he was always unpredictable. Your dad's passing has dug up things that you've tried to bury, I think, Marina suggested. Now you're facing them. Peter said, looking at Marina attentively. I remember one time, when I was probably around 5 years old, Marina chimed, warmly gazing into the past. My father, when he wasn't using, would play games with me. We would play for hours and hours until his knees hurt from running. Those were my best memories, I think, of my childhood. One time we went to this big deserty area at the end of the cul-de-sac. There were big heaps of wooden pallets and wire and other construction things, and we were playing hide-and-seek tag for a while. When it was my turn to hide, I decided to run as fast as I could to this tiny shack halfway up a nearby hill. It used to be a lookout or something, probably back in Wild West times. I hid inside, watching my dad through a knot in the wood, laughing mischievously because I knew that I was breaking the rules. Finally, he looked around, saw the shack, and begrudgingly climbed up the hill. I thought maybe there was still a chance to win, so I backed into the darkest corner. As I placed my hand on the floor, something big scuttled across it, and I screamed bloody murder. My dad swooped in and picked me up and surveyed the shack. On the floor was a big black tarantula. It ran at my dad, and he stomped on it. I can still hear the sound. Peter, laughing, agreed. I would have screamed bloody murder too. The two continued to drink to stories and memories, humiliating, tragic, celebratory. Peter finally asked, without trepidation, if Marina would like to spend the rest of the night with him, and, without Peter finally asked, without trepidation, if Marina would like to spend the rest of the night with him, and, without trepidation, she agreed. Where are you staying? Peter asked curiously. Oh, the Phoenix Inn, room 212. "Oh, we're going to have to call an Uber," Marina wheezed with hilarity as she dizzily stood up. But as the two made to leave, Marina interjected. "Peter, I'm sorry," she said, looking into his eyes. "I really can't." Something passed between them. Both of them knew what the other was thinking. "Marina, you know I don't care about that. You told me when we were just kids, and I don't care. What else do I have going for me in this life anyway?" In a split second, the mood between the two changed. "What?" Marina pointed. Both paused, Peter from submission and Marina from fury. "You don't know what the fuck you're talking about," Marina hissed. "Go home." "Marina, please." She walked to her car and slammed the door. Peter rushed and opened it before she started the engine. "I see what you have," he said, "and I want to know what it's like, to feel free. I don't have anything, Marina. I don't have anything in my life anymore." "You want it to be a choice for you?" "This isn't a choice. I never chose it. It chose me. You choose to throw your life away after knowing about the things I've had to do? Hell! I've known hell. Now shut my fucking door and go home before you ruin things for good." "Marina, I told you never to talk about it." And her rage turned into tears, partially from anger, partially from self-pity. "I've tried to forget about it," he pleaded, "but in my head I know that it's real, and how can someone know a secret like that and not want to know more?" "Fix your life the real way," Marina said, and she slammed her door and drove away. Peter stood in the bar's parking lot for a moment, shocked by what just happened. He didn't know why he pleaded for Marina to talk to him about her darkest secret, the secret both agreed to lock in a buried safe years ago. Curiosity germinated and blossomed like a plant parched by desert heat, thirsty, and only to be quenched by true knowledge. As he sat in his car, breathing slowly and trying to sober up, he felt confusion, regret, and most strangely to him, desire. Peter awoke the next day with his mouth tasting like a lukewarm glass of water left to sit overnight. Through brown curtains, a dim sunlight meandered through his father's empty apartment, as if aimlessly lost. Today was the funeral. Of the several funeral attendees, Peter knew most. His father's friends, who used to tease him on poker nights, and only once let him join in, simultaneously agreed how much he looked like his father. It was true, he accepted. He did look like his father, especially these days. But in his coffin, he could hardly find a similarity in the miles of pale, puffy wrinkles on his waxen mask of a face. Nor could he find a drop of sympathy in the hundreds of powder-puffed sunspots. But when the coffin was lowered, surprisingly to him, he could find tears. He wept, not for his dad, but for himself, his mom, his older brother, and so many others who were not standing with him on the cemetery's patchy grass. "Am I crying for him?" he thought, perhaps as a vain, polite gesture. But no, he knew that he was crying for himself, the person who so greatly resembled the mummified body baking in the black box before him. He looked at the sky, hoping a cloud would roll over and bathe the streets cinematically in thick rain. No, the sky was empty. He sat in a pub and finished 3 shots of whiskey alone as the sun began to set. He decided he would drive to the city, just a 20-minute drive over the mountains, and then send Marina a message that he was nearby. "Hey, Marina, I'm here. I'm sorry for the other night. Can we please talk? I was an asshole. You mean so much more to me than that. I was drunk." No, not good enough, he thought, and he decided to just speak his mind in the moment. His father's belongings jangled in the trunk as he drove towards civilization. All at once the skyscrapers of the city were unveiled as he curved around the golden mountain ridge. This was a stupid idea, he thought as he sent the text to Marina. While waiting for the response, he went to a thrift shop and handed over the box with his father's belongings, digging through at the last minute to retrieve a few framed pictures of family, as well as his dad's tarnished graduation ring. Goodbye. Marina still hadn't responded. He decided to walk through the streets and explore. If it got too late, he'd get a hotel room before driving back home. It was worth it for Marina. He couldn't head home without some sort of resolution. Just a quick meetup. When else would he get to see her? He remembered what Marina told him when they were teenagers. There are people like me in big cities. We usually recognize each other. There's so few of us because we usually die very young, or worse. But when we see people like us, we know. We can tell from a mile away. He could tell that Marina was different from a mile away, too. She had always been so special. He noticed his father's first name on a billboard. The memory of death loomed over him. For a moment, he thought that maybe this whole thing was a mistake. He could return home now. But instead, he strode forward and entered a bank, withdrew his card, and asked the small, timid Mexican woman behind the counter to withdraw $200. The banker moved out of sight for a moment, but he caught a glance of something he didn't immediately place. Leaning over the counter, he tried to get a better look at her. She returned with his money, handing it to him, and he noticed her hand's pale, milky, pearlescent skin. They caught each other's eyes in the transaction, both holding on to the stack of money with the tips of their fingers, gazing with mouths agape in reluctance. He took the money, still staring, and she, without breaking eye contact for more than a moment, walked through the doors separating each of them, walked straight up to him, and they both kissed with eyes wide open, grasping onto each other tightly as the world began to grow fuzzy and warp around them. He began to feel faint as every drop of life force was sucked out of him in an instant. The kiss lasted for 1,000 years. He felt visions of terror and ecstasy whip through his skull, tearing his brain apart with vicious hurricane winds. He felt something forbidden, passed through the ages, but oh so delicious, course through his veins, as each nerve ending shriveled, died, and returned to a preserved, pulsating, and plasticine state. When their lips left each other's touch, he was a changed being. He stepped backwards, staring into her eyes as she stared into his, both aghast at what just took place. It seemed like his exit was happening in slow motion. Something was wrong. All he could focus on was the spinning sensation, the blackness around the edge of his vision, a near-death vignette. He stumbled to his car and swerved to the nearest motel, checked in clumsily, and crashed into the mattress. He awoke as the blood-red dawn pierced the gaps in the curtains, flickering streaks across the room. Sitting up, he was unnerved by the fact that his body felt so light, as if the burden of gravity no longer applied to him. Not only did his muscles not strain to carry his body, but each touch felt numb and unpleasantly cold, as if his body was no longer attached to him. Stumbling to the coffee pot, he watched the machine drip slowly into the paper cup. When he brought it to his lips, he recalled the pink ecstasy of the kiss from the woman in the bank. But when the coffee passed over his tongue, he felt only the same numb sensation. He couldn't smell the coffee either. It passed into his throat as if it were thick, heavy air. Although deeply confused, he was filled with a detached curiosity. He stared at himself in the mirror. His eyes were cloudy with dry, bloodshot haze, although he felt no discomfort in them. He walked to the motel lobby. He grabbed an apple and a biscuit, but the food tasted like dust and felt dry in his mouth, and he found himself spitting into the trash can at the first bite. He knew that his experience the day before was no dream. He was no longer the same being in any way. Instead of feeling powerful, as he expected, he felt thirsty, an inner thirst so dry that the ocean couldn't quench it. He rolled in his bed in agony, clawing at his skin, squeezing his fingerprints, fingernails, the bones in his fingers, and the blood vessels encompassing, and the bones in his wrists, and the bones in his thumbs, but every piece of his body felt cold and numb and utterly devoid of joy, or life, or hope. It was as if his own light in the world went gray and took every color with it, draining even the blue from the sky. All sensations numbed to a steady nothing. He couldn't even feel for a pulse. but in his reflection he knew that his blood was still pumping, as he could see the small veins in his neck and forehead pulsing at a regular rhythm, just as they always had. But, though he knew he was alive, he also knew what he felt a corpse would feel like, preserved and sewn together. He saw his father in the coffin, and he was him. Indeed, he felt smothered in a suit of his own skin. He lay in a sprawled position across the motel bed for hours as the darkness of night crept through the land. As he regained consciousness, the first thing he thought of was his favorite ritual. At the end of a long piece of work, an essay or a write-up, one of those dreadful aspects of work that leaves you with a stiff back, he would pour himself a cup of coffee, add real honey instead of some chemical sweetener, and recline in a chair on the back porch overlooking the dry, buzzing pine forest, and see the neighbors through the trees in the far distance, with their fires glowing and kids laughing, and smoke a cigarette and drink his coffee. Sometimes he'd pour himself a whiskey or some wine. Sometimes he'd open the window and play one of his old records through, his most pleasant little rewards for overcoming the ongoing strains of life. And he realized that even those rituals could not make him feel. Not the music, or the coffee, or the whiskey, or even the stiff back. He lay there through the night feeling comatose, as if he was floating, and then noticed the sun beginning to rise. He walked to the window and parted the curtains, and at the sight of the orange dawn he felt a glisten of memory, and for a moment he remembered the summer nights as a child, where he and his brother would lay their sleeping bags out on the trampoline, stay awake all night, and watch the sunrise together. For only half a second he felt joy. For 3 seconds he felt the most painful nostalgia. Then he felt nothing. He remembered the last thing he did truly feel, the embrace of the stranger that sent him spinning into other realms of trembling color, lost in indescribable pleasure, a pleasure that took all else away after it faded. At loss for any other answer, he felt that the only person who could help him was Marina. He downed a couple miniature bottles of multicolored alcohol from the fridge, then smoked a cigarette, then brushed his teeth, then changed his clothes. The weather was nice, so he decided to walk the several blocks to Marina's hotel, and maybe buy her a gift along the way. Besides, something about walking seemed thrilling, being out among the people bustling, seeing all shades of life from brilliant to abysmal, cars rushing through. Maybe this could help him to feel. He thought he was choosing for himself, you see. As he walked past blocks of tall, corporate buildings, he felt that everything was the same, but somehow different. Before, the sky was blue, the world red, yellow, white, black, people, animals, obstacles. Now it felt as if the world was tinted a sort of toxic, artificial, piss yellow, as if he was caught in a gigantic wasp trap. He saw people bustling, talking, laughing, but they were behind a blurred pane of glass, detached from him. Each of their teeth was some bestial fang, their movements robotic. Even the smell of people rushing by made him sick to his stomach. He had the feeling one would get if left stranded in a submarine at the bottom of the ocean in the dark, like he was absolutely alone in a large, empty ocean surrounded by fish that looked like some cruel joke of nature, like he was standing alone on the gallows and at any moment the floor would drop out from beneath him. Beneath the American sidewalks he felt centuries of bodies. He saw a glimmer of light for every body buried. He felt that he could hear the voices of Native Americans chanting and singing for protection from some brutal creature in the mountains. He could feel the past becoming the present. Time, indeed, felt eternal. He summed all of this up by deciding that he felt ill but mighty. The worst part was the hunger. He craved the very essence that gives people a soul. He craved to be deeper than deep within a soul, and to drink from it freely. Not love desired by humans, but prey desired by predator. The worst part was the thirst and the hunger, and the feeling of empty space around him, the movement of people mocking him, each person a jeering reflection in a house of mirrors. Hunger has an interesting way of changing people. The sweetest person can become a tyrant when underfueled. The tyrant can be calmed by a nice meal. Most of us fill our fridge with foods we love to eat, and couldn't imagine stomaching something raw or rancid. But if we starve for long enough, we'll eat just about anything. Hunger for food becomes desire for food. Desire for food becomes life versus death. When that state kicks in, there's no knowing what we'll do to survive. He purchased a water bottle and a pack of cigarettes from a convenience store. He smoked and drank while walking. The water tasted like air and the smoke tasted like dust. More desire growled. He started to feel his slowed pulse quicken with an almost perverse excitement. With every passerby, his adrenaline kicked in. These small, naive people, he thought. They have no idea what horrors exist in the world, what horrors exist in suburban neighborhoods and in the dreams of suffering children, what traumas have been endured, the unknown strength of strangers. He wanted to lunge at someone and scream in their face, shake them and make them beg. He felt furious at the world, the people in it, especially himself. He had an empty feeling in the pit of his stomach, the feeling you get when you realize that you've made a grave mistake. Passing through the lobby, he could feel Marina nearby. The knowledge excited him. He could practically smell her, he thought, and he realized that he could, as well as hear her voice through muffled static. He desired her with every fiber of his being. That was the only thing he knew. He used the elevator to get to Marina's floor, being pulled as if by an invisible magnet through the hall. He found himself at what he knew was her doorstep, room 212. He knocked. The door swung partway open, the chain secure. "Peter, are you all right?" But before she could finish her sentence, she had her answer. He was not all right. He stood on the other side of the cracked door, sweaty and pale blue, as if the circulation in his body was failing. He trembled from toe to head, gasping, out of breath, and his wide eyes were bloodshot and sunken. She could smell it on him, the scent of the disintegrating, starving undead. But what truly made her run for her loaded pistol was his pupils. They had lost any semblance of human eyes. They reminded her of a vicious, trapped shark, widened and black like polished, wet obsidian. He slammed his body against the door, and the chain ripped free with the splintering of cheap wood. All he knew was that he could smell her, and he was hungry. Pulling her pistol from her bag, she aimed it at him and fired, hitting his abdomen. He was so close that his blood splattered onto her like mist as his hands wrapped greedily around her skull. She screamed with all her might, hoping someone would save her from her attacker, but before she could let out her second scream, the soft flesh of her neck was already detached, and blood poured freely from the open wound. Peter spit the chunk of Marina's flesh onto the floor, then began swallowing mouthful after mouthful of her glorious, forbidden essence. For a moment, he felt a spark of joy, the same feeling a cat must feel when finally catching a bird. But then he started retching, the contents of his stomach pouring out all at once, and he realized that Marina's blood was brown, thick, fetid, and rotting. She stared up at him with blank eyes, glistening tar flowing freely from her neck like thick maple syrup from a tap in a tree. Upon seeing what he had done in his mad, animalistic state, combined with the fact that he was still unbearably hungry, he picked up the pistol from the carpet and aimed it at his brain. "This is only a dream. This is only a dream." A shout interrupted him. "Stop!" A security guard entered the hotel room, then quickly bolted away through the hall upon seeing the corpse on the floor and the bloody man holding a gun to his skull. Peter held tight to the gun and escaped, climbing over the balcony ledge, landing hard on his feet and realizing that a bone in his leg had snapped, not by any pain, but by the sharp sound. He ran to the nearest street and pointed the gun at the first car he saw. The husband and wife exited the vehicle, and he jumped into the driver's seat and pushed the gas to the floor, speeding toward the edge of the city to where the desert began. The uneven desert ground caused the car to thrash about, almost flipping, but he remained single-minded as his body continued to burn with a desire that he knew would be eternally unquenchable. Splattering cacti and sending dust flying through the air, he aimed the car at the massive, decades-abandoned, hillside crevice dug for construction, and dove straight to the bottom, flying through the windshield, dying instantly. Newspapers the next day compared the grisly deaths to everything from a shark attack to a vampire to a spider. In truth, it had nothing to do with the animal kingdom. True vampirism can only be accomplished by animals with intelligence. A vampire is like a mosquito jealously sucking the blood from another mosquito. True vampires tend to have a very strong will to live. Selfishness inevitably leads to death. The show got a new screenwriter. Now wake up! You're not in the dream anymore. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that story. I hope it took you on a ride, and I hope you get to re-listen to it again and again until you realize everything that I put into it. And I'm very thankful for you all listening. A reminder before I sign off to subscribe, to share the link to this podcast to your friends if you think they'd enjoy the story. Check out all my online content if you want more, and may the blessings of the old gods be forever upon you. And I will see you guys in the next one.